They always say the attic holds things better left undisturbed. I used to laugh at that kind of talk, chalk it up to cheap horror stories and dusty nostalgia. But after my father died, I found myself climbing those creaky wooden steps with a crowbar in one hand and a knot in my stomach. He'd been gone 2 weeks when the lawyer called. The funeral was sparse, quiet. No eulogy, just the hard thud of dirt on the casket. I hadn't seen him in 24 years, not since he walked out on my mother and me. I didn't cry. I didn't know how to. Your father left the house to you, the lawyer said. It's in a trust. There's a condition. That's how I ended up in his attic, sorting through his past like it might explain mine. I half expected to find nothing but rotting boxes of old National Geographics, beer-stained flannel, maybe a shotgun. Instead, in the farthest corner beneath an old wool tarp, I found the box. It was small, made of cedar, and latched shut with a brass clasp that squeaked like it hadn't been opened in decades. There was a note on top, yellowed with age and scrawled in handwriting I recognized only from old court documents. For Eli. Only open when you're ready to forgive me. I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the rafters. Forgive you? I muttered. For what? Leaving? For not showing up? For missing my entire life? I opened the box anyway. Inside were 33 birthday cards. Every one of them addressed to me. The first said, Happy 5th birthday, in glittery red ink. The last one had no date, just, For when you're ready. I sat on the attic floor and held that first card in my hands. My fingers trembled like they were touching something sacred, or cursed. When I opened it, a photograph slipped out. Me. Age 5. At a birthday party I didn't remember. But I recognized the cheap plastic dinosaur hat and the tear in my shirt. I'd seen that shirt before, in a photo Mom kept in her wallet. The card read, Eli, I know I wasn't there. I watched from my truck across the street. Your mother would have called the cops if I got closer. You look so happy. I hope you know I still sang happy birthday to you in the car. Love, Dad. I stared at the words for what felt like an hour. The attic grew darker around me, like the house was holding its breath. There's a thing that happens when grief and rage get tangled up. Your chest tightens. You want to scream, but it gets caught in your throat. That's how I felt holding that card. I flipped through the others, not reading, just counting. Each one had a different year, a different design. Superheroes. Footballs. Then more serious ones, landscapes, lighthouses. Cards for a boy becoming a man. That night I didn't sleep. I took the box downstairs and set it on the kitchen table. The house smelled like him. Tobacco. Motor oil. Something metallic. It made my stomach turn. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. The box creaked open. Just a hair. I swear I hadn't touched it. And sitting on top of the stack was the card for my 16th birthday. It hadn't been on top before. Maybe I was sleep deprived. Maybe I was dreaming. But I opened it. 16. I bet you're taller than me by now. Probably driving. I always wanted to teach you how to drive stick. Your mom said I wasn't fit to teach you anything. She was right in some ways. But not about that. I kept the Mustang running just in case. I didn't remember a Mustang. But in the garage the next morning, under a tarp, was a 1968 red Ford Mustang. The keys were still hanging on a hook above the workbench. My heart pounded like I was the one driving at 90 miles an hour down some country road. But I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I read the second letter. Then the third. Every night for a week, another card found its way to the top of the stack. As if the box knew which one I needed. Each one was a window into a man I didn't know. A man who cried in his truck. Who never stopped watching, even when he wasn't allowed near. Who bought me gifts he never gave. Who talked to me in his head, every single year. I didn't know what to do with that. With him. I hated him for leaving. But I also hated how much I wanted to believe he loved me. By the 8th night, I was waiting for the attic to whisper again. for the box to choose. It did. The card for my 21st birthday was on top. You're legal now. I was going to take you for your first drink. I sat at the bar 2 blocks from your college apartment. Ordered 2 whiskeys. Watched the door. You never came. Of course you didn't. You never knew I was there. I remembered that night. I went out with friends. Got drunk. Thought about texting my dad. Thought about screaming at him. But I didn't. I went back to the bar he mentioned. It was still there. Same cracked stools. Same flickering neon sign. I ordered 2 whiskeys. Left one untouched. Something in the air shifted. Like someone was watching. Not in a creepy way, more like acknowledgement. I didn't believe in ghosts. Still don't. But sometimes, when you sit still long enough, you feel the truth humming through your bones. He was there. Not in flesh. Not in forgiveness. But in something else. Maybe in fate. Maybe in the letters he never sent. I always thought rock bottom would feel more cinematic. Maybe rain. Maybe sirens. Maybe some dramatic voice in my head narrating how it all went to shit. But it wasn't like that. It was fluorescent lights, cold concrete, and the quiet humiliation of holding your breath while they pat you down. I turned 25 in a holding cell in Milwaukee. Bar fight. I didn't throw the first punch, but I definitely threw the last. Guy said something about my mom, I think. Or maybe it was about the girl I was seeing at the time. Doesn't matter. I was drunk, angry, and full of things I hadn't dealt with. I was released at 5 a.m. Walked out with a busted lip, no phone, and a fine that would haunt my bank account for a year. I got back to my apartment and found it sitting there. The box. I hadn't brought it with me. I'd left it in the garage, under a pile of old coats. But there it was, right on my kitchen table. And on top, the card for my 25th birthday. I didn't even hesitate. I opened it with shaking hands. 25. I was in jail too, once. Drunk and stupid and trying to forget my father the only way I knew how. They cuffed me behind the bar on 5th and Lincoln. I thought about you that night. I was your age. Isn't that something? I wondered if pain was inherited. Like cheekbones or bad knees. I sat down. Hard. Like my legs couldn't carry the weight of his words. Like the timeline of my life had just folded in on itself. Was this fate? Was this genetics? Was this a man trying to reach across time with nothing but ink and regret? I didn't know. All I knew was that, for the first time in my life, I wanted to write him back. But how do you write to the dead? That question followed me for days. Hung in the air like smoke. I found myself carrying the letter in my jacket pocket, unfolding it at random moments. Reading the same line again and again. I wondered if pain was inherited. I hadn't inherited much. My mom raised me. Worked 2 jobs. Did her best to protect me from his shadow. But it turns out shadows stretch. They find you. On the 3rd night after jail, I dreamed of him. We were sitting in the Mustang. Engine off. Rain tapping on the windshield. He looked older than I remembered. Beard streaked with gray. Eyes tired. Kind. I messed up, he said. I didn't answer. I just stared at my hands. You don't have to forgive me, he added. Just don't let the hate rot you. I woke up crying. I never cried like that, not even when he left. The next morning, the box had shifted again. Another card on top, 15th birthday. I bet high school's rough. Mine was. I got beat up for being quiet. For having a drunk for a dad. I started lifting weights just to survive. Don't make the same mistake I did, trying to be harder than the world. Stay soft. It's braver. That day, I called an old friend. Someone I hadn't talked to in years. We used to be close before I pushed everyone away. We met for coffee. Laughed like it hadn't been 4 years. I didn't tell him about the box. Or the cards. Or the way I was slowly falling apart and putting myself back together. But I told him I was sorry. That I missed our friendship. He said he missed me too. That night, the 10th birthday card surfaced. Double digits. I wanted to take you to the batting cages. You loved baseball back then. I watched you play once, from behind the fence. You hit a triple. I cheered so loud people looked around. But no one saw me. I don't remember the game. But I remember the feeling. Like someone out there was rooting for me. I used to think I was imagining it. Now I'm not so sure. The dreams kept coming. Not every night. But often enough that I started keeping a journal. Writing to him. Things I wish I'd said. Things I wasn't brave enough to ask. One night, I left a letter on the kitchen table. Folded, addressed simply, Dad. The next morning, it was gone. In its place, a new card. One I hadn't seen before. Not numbered. Not labeled. Just a blank envelope with a single line on the front. You're getting closer. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a photo of my mom. Younger. Laughing. Arms wrapped around a man who looked just like me, only more tired. They were standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. On the back. She loved me once. I loved her always. We made something beautiful. It wasn't a birthday card. It was something else. A confession. Or maybe a reminder. That before the abandonment, before the silence, there had been love. And maybe, somewhere buried under the wreckage, that love still mattered. I stopped asking how the box knew. I just accepted it, like some part of the house was alive, listening. Waiting. Every morning, another card. Every night, another dream. The next one came after I found the photo of my mom in his arms. It wasn't labeled with a birthday, just an envelope with my name in thicker handwriting than the others. Eli, I saw you yesterday. You were walking down Locust, head down, hands stuffed in your jacket. You looked tired. Like I used to look. I almost rolled down the window, but I didn't. I was afraid you'd see too much of yourself in me and run. That letter shook something loose in me. I had walked down Locust that day. Had a fight with my boss. Missed a bus. Kicked a trash can. And I remembered looking over my shoulder, feeling watched. I thought it was paranoia. Now I didn't know. The next dream came colder. We were sitting in the attic. Just me and him. The box between us. He looked like the ghost of every version of him I never met, young, old, sick, smiling, ashamed. You're not reading them in order, he said. I know. You think that matters? I don't know what matters. He nodded, solemn. That's how I felt the day I left. I reached for him. My hand went through air. I woke up sweating. Downstairs, the card for my 8th birthday waited, tilted against a half-full mug of coffee I didn't remember pouring. 8 years old? You wanted to be an astronaut. I bought you a telescope. Left it at your grandma's doorstep with a note. She never told your mom. I think she used it herself. I called my grandma. She paused. Said she didn't know what I was talking about. Then added, but I did have a beautiful telescope once. Found it on the porch. Thought maybe someone left it by mistake. Another piece locked into place. I went back to the attic. I sat beside the box for hours. Just me, dust, and time. I said nothing. I just listened. Eventually, the silence bent. The next card appeared. 21 again. That bar I mentioned, the one I sat outside when you turned 21. I left something under the stool. Gum stuck it there. Still smells like whiskey. If you're ever brave enough to go looking. I didn't think. I just drove. The bar hadn't changed. Neither had the stool. I crouched, ran my hand underneath, and there it was. A napkin, folded and sealed in tape. Inside, a drawing. Crayon. Of a boy in a cape. My hero, scribbled underneath. His handwriting, but childlike. A copy of something I must have made once. It wrecked me. That night, the dreams didn't come. Just a deep, exhausted sleep that felt like a chapter ending. In the morning, The box was empty. For the first time in weeks, no card. No whisper. No photo. Just quiet. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I lit a candle, set it next to the box, and whispered, "I'm still listening." An hour later, I returned from the kitchen. And there it was again. The card for my 30th birthday. 30. I missed everything. And still, I feel like I know you. You talk in your sleep. You bite your nails when you're anxious. You love fiercely and leave too fast. You're mine. I never stopped being yours. I sat on the floor and cried. No rage. No confusion. Just the strange comfort of connection that defies logic. The line between then and now blurred. He was gone. And somehow, he was still showing up. Maybe the dead don't haunt us out of guilt or punishment. Maybe they just need us to remember that they tried. And maybe, sometimes, that's enough. The box didn't move again for 3 days. 3 days of silence, of normal life trying to resume its shape, like nothing strange had ever happened. I went to work. I answered emails. I even went on a date with a woman named Claire, who laughed at all the wrong jokes and had this soft, slanted smile that reminded me of no one I'd ever known. But I kept thinking about the cards. About the dreams. About how grief, when left unopened, keeps sending itself back to you until you sign for it. On the 4th morning, a noise woke me. Not a bang, not a whisper, just the creak of floorboards outside my bedroom. The kind you only notice when your body's still more dream than bone. I opened the door. No one. But at the top of the stairs, the box sat again. This time open. The card was old. Fragile. The envelope had cracked at the corners. On the front, "For the year I should have come back. I was sober for 13 months. I almost knocked. I stood outside the house with a bouquet of dying wildflowers I picked from the ditch on Highway 27. Your mom was laughing through the window. You were on her lap. I turned around. I wasn't brave. I wasn't enough. I wanted to be. That year was 10. I remember Mom seemed lighter. We had pancakes every Saturday. I didn't know why at the time, but I think it was because he hadn't called in months. That was peace for her. I put the letter back and went for a walk. The leaves had started to change. Red bleeding into gold. It looked like the trees were on fire. I walked without direction, but I ended up at the cemetery. I hadn't been since the funeral. His headstone was simple. Just his name. No quote. No beloved anything. I knelt. Traced the engraved letters like they might give me something. A spark. A revelation. "I'm trying," I whispered. Nothing answered. Not the wind. Not the earth. Just the rustle of branches far above, doing their own dying dance. When I got home, another envelope waited on my bed. No handwriting. No stamp. Inside, a Polaroid. Me and Mom. Christmas morning. I was 11. She was tired but smiling. On the back, in faint pencil, "I took this from the porch. You still believed in Santa. I still believed in you." That was the year I found a bike under the tree. Mom said it came from a church donation. I never questioned it. I checked the porch camera. It hadn't recorded anything since I moved in. That night, I opened the attic again. I carried the box to his old bedroom, placed it on the bed like I was tucking in a child. "More," I said. A card slid forward. The sound made me flinch. 17. The year you slammed the door so hard the glass cracked. You were angry all the time. I thought maybe if I left you alone, you'd learn to carry your pain better than I did. That was a mistake. You needed someone to scream at, not silence. I remembered that door. Mom had cried more than I did. Said I was becoming him. Maybe I was. The next morning, Claire called. She wanted to know if I'd be up for dinner. I said yes, but my mind stayed in the house. Because I'd started to hear it. Footsteps. Breathing that wasn't mine. The shuffle of papers when the wind didn't blow. I wasn't scared. I was seen. One night I left the box open before bed. I placed a photo of myself in it, me at 26, standing on the roof of my first apartment, looking out at the city like I owned something. When I woke, the photo was gone. In its place, a card. "This is the year you almost disappeared." I saw it in your eyes. The tiredness. The floating. You walked past the lake every day. I followed once. Thought you might go in. You didn't. I never stopped thanking God for that. I hadn't told anyone about the lake. About that moment I'd stood with my toes hanging over the edge of the frozen bank, wondering how thin the ice really was. He'd been there. Or something had. I started talking to him again. Out loud. In the garage. In the bathroom. In the car. Sometimes I'd hear creaks and answer. Other times just silence. But it felt like something was shifting. One night I asked, "Did you ever regret it? Walking away?" I waited. The light flickered. The attic groaned. And in the morning, the final envelope in the box appeared. The one marked, "If you still care." I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I wasn't sure what it would change. But I held it close to my chest, like a heartbeat I'd never heard but always felt. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a child abandoned. I felt like a son being found. Somewhere, between the cards and the ghosts, I was beginning to understand what love looked like when it came too late but still tried to arrive. And maybe, in its own crooked, broken way, it still could. The envelope sat on my nightstand for 2 days. "If you still care." The words were beginning to wear into the paper from my fingertips. I touched it every time I passed, but I didn't open it. I wasn't ready. Or maybe I didn't want the story to end. Maybe part of me needed it to keep going, like the sound of someone's voice on the other end of a phone line, quiet, but still there. Claire stayed over for the first time that weekend. She didn't ask about the box. She only stared at it once, briefly, like it gave her the chills. Later, while brushing her hair in the bathroom, she said, "This house feels heavy." I nodded. "It is." We made breakfast the next morning. She wore my hoodie. I liked the way she looked in it. Like she belonged to a different version of my life. A life without shadows. But even then, my eyes kept drifting back upstairs. The envelope was calling. Finally, on a Sunday evening, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, sat at the kitchen table, and slit it open with a paring knife. Inside, a letter. Not a card. Not a quick scribble. A full letter. 4 pages, handwritten, in the shaky scrawl I'd come to recognize as his. "Eli. If you're reading this, then you did something I could never do, you stayed. Even in the house I fled from, with the memories I tried to outrun. I wrote this knowing I wouldn't be there when you found it. Because I don't deserve to be there. I miss too much. And I know an apology doesn't fix that. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. I left because I thought I was poison. I saw it in your mother's eyes. The fear. The way she tightened when I walked into a room. I was my father's son, Eli. Mean when I drank. Quiet when I was angry. Dangerous when I couldn't find the right words. But I wanted better for you. I thought by staying away, I was saving you. And maybe I did save you a little. Maybe your silence didn't grow teeth the way mine did. Maybe your hands stayed open instead of clenched. I've watched you become a man. From parking lots. From bar corners. From the sidewalk across the street. And what I saw gave me hope. You're kind. You're thoughtful. You carry your pain like a lantern, not a burden. I was wrong to think I wasn't part of that. I was part of it. In absence. In memory. In the hollow spaces you filled with your own strength. I'm proud of you. I hope that means something even now. I love you. Dad. I didn't cry. Not then. Not immediately. I just sat there, tracing the letters. Reading the words over and over again until they blurred. I looked up, and across from me, Claire was standing in the doorway, silent. "Are you okay?" she asked. I folded the letter. placed it gently back in the envelope. I think so, I said. I think I'm finally getting okay. We went for a walk that night. It was cold, the sky wide open above us. Stars like pinpricks. I told her everything. About the letters. The box. The dreams. The whispers. She didn't interrupt. Just listened. When I finished, she said, "Maybe he couldn't show up then. But he's showing up now. In the only way he knows how." I nodded. I think he's always been trying. We stopped at a little bridge that crossed a creek. The same one I used to ride past on my bike. I pulled the final letter from my pocket, read it one last time, then folded it again and dropped it into the water. It floated, then spun, then disappeared. That night the box was gone. I searched every room. Every closet. Even the attic. Gone. All that was left was a single photo, pinned to the wall above the bed. One I hadn't seen before. Me and him. I'm maybe 3. I'm on his shoulders, laughing. He's looking up at me like I'm the sky. On the back, in faded ink, "This is my favorite memory. I hope it becomes yours too." And somehow it did. Not because I remembered it, but because I chose to. And maybe that's how healing works, not by erasing what's broken, but by planting something beautiful right beside it. By choosing every day to believe we were loved. Even if it came too late. Even if it came wrapped in regret. It still came. The house didn't feel empty without the box. It felt paused. Like something had stepped into the next room but hadn't truly left. I thought about that last photo more than I wanted to admit. Him looking up at me like I was the sun. A moment I couldn't recall, but somehow I could feel it. It pulsed through me in quiet waves whenever I closed my eyes. I started going through the rest of the house. Not just to clean, not to renovate, but to search. There was this itch under my skin, like something was still hidden, like I hadn't truly seen all he left behind. And part of me was afraid to stop looking. Because if I stopped, it would mean the conversation was really over. In the hallway closet behind the coats, I found a small crawlspace door. I had missed it before, warped to match the wall, a perfect disguise. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside, there were boxes. Not many. Just 2. One marked, Eli's drawings. The other had no label at all. I took them both out, knees creaking under the weight of time. The first box was filled with my childhood. Crayon drawings. Stick figure comics. A paper plate with dried macaroni that spelled out, "Dad." I stared at it for a long time. He had kept these. All of them. Even the ones I thought I'd lost. Even the ones Mom said she probably threw out in one of her purges. He had them. Protected. Preserved. The second box held a single object. A tape recorder. And a note. For when your voice is louder than mine. I took it upstairs, sat on the bed beneath the photo, and pressed play. Static. Then, "Eli. You're older now. Probably older than I was when I made most of these mistakes. You've probably learned that people can live with guilt longer than they can live with truth. I used to scream into empty rooms. Swear that I'd do better tomorrow. That tomorrow never came. Not for me. But maybe it can for you. If you're listening, it means you found the boxes. It means you didn't burn it all. And that's enough for me." I let it play until it clicked off. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was full. Full of everything he never got to say out loud. Claire and I spent more time together after that. She asked questions. I answered them honestly. One night we laid on the living room floor, staring up at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow clock. "What would you say to him, if he walked through that door right now?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I traced the shape of her hand with my finger. Finally I whispered, "I'd tell him I'm still angry. But I'd also tell him thank you." "For what?" "For trying. Even if it was too late. Even if it hurt." The next morning I woke to music. Not loud. Not modern. A soft crackling old tune from somewhere deep in the house. A vinyl hiss and a man singing about second chances. I followed it. Down to the basement, to a corner I never touched. There, the record player was spinning. Plugged in. Undisturbed. Playing a song I'd only heard once, years ago, in the background of a home video Mom took when I was 4. The day he built me a treehouse. I don't remember the treehouse. But I remember the song. And the smell of wood glue. And the way he'd called me, champ, like it meant something big. The music faded. The record stopped. And beneath it, taped to the base, one last scrap of paper. I'm not in the box anymore. I'm in you. Every step forward I'll be there. Every time you choose love over fear. Every time you show up instead of run. I'll be there. Love doesn't always leave the way it arrives. Sometimes it stays. I sat in the dark for hours, letting the weight of that truth settle in my bones. He was gone. But he stayed. Not in the house. In me. And that was something I'd carry, not as a burden, but as a birthright. There was a mirror in the hallway, oval, antique, with a wood frame cracked from decades of heat and silence. I passed it 100 times without really seeing it. But after the music stopped, after the basement gave me that last note, something about it pulled me in. I saw my reflection, but it wasn't just me. It was him too. Not as a ghost. Not a specter looming behind my shoulder. But something in the angle of my brow. The tired slope of my eyes. The shape of my mouth when I wasn't trying to wear it like armor. He was in me. And not just in the ways I feared. I reached out, touched the glass, half expecting it to ripple. Behind the mirror, I noticed a panel. Subtle. Just a notch in the wood. I pressed it. It clicked. The mirror swung open like a door. Inside, tucked in a shallow alcove, was a leather journal. No dust. As if it had just been placed there. I brought it to the kitchen, hands trembling. The pages were stiff, browned at the edges. The first entry was dated 2 years before he died. March 2nd. Saw Eli today. He dropped his groceries crossing 5th. His bag split. Bananas, cereal, a jar of marinara. He swore under his breath. I laughed. Quiet. I didn't help him. Just watched him fix it. He looked like a man. When did that happen? Page after page, he chronicled sightings. Glimpses. Moments stolen from across streets and through cafe windows. Always watching, never interfering. May 15th. Followed him into the bookstore. He lingered over poetry. That's his mother in him. I used to write her poems. Maybe he remembers that somewhere, in the blood. September 10th. He yelled at someone on the phone. I think it was about rent. He looked tired. Angry. Like me. God help him. There were dozens. Years of them. I felt like I was reading someone else's dreams. One passage hit harder than the rest. July 27th. His birthday. I left a letter in his mailbox. No stamp. No name. Just wrote from someone who loves you. I watched him find it. He read it, then crumpled it. But he didn't throw it away. He tucked it in his pocket. I cried in my car for an hour after. I remembered that letter. I thought it was from an ex. I never knew what to do with it. But I still had it, buried in an old shoebox beneath my bed. It wasn't just a letter anymore. It was proof. He had never truly left. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Claire had gone home. The house was silent again, but different now. Not empty. Just waiting. In the middle of the night, I dreamed I was a child again. Running through the backyard barefoot, the grass wet from morning dew. He was there, standing by the fence, arms open. I didn't hesitate. I ran into them. When I woke, my pillow was damp with tears. And beside me, on the nightstand, was another card. Where it had come from, I didn't know. You found the journal. Good. I hoped you would. I wasn't brave enough to leave it in the open. I wasn't brave enough for a lot of things. But I'm proud of you, Eli. You keep finding me, even when I don't leave a map. I held the card like it was breathing. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I walked into the garage, cleared off the workbench, hung up the tools, swept the floor. I started rebuilding the birdhouse he never finished. It had sat there for who knows how long. Half-painted, lopsided. Like an apology mid-sentence. I didn't know why I started. Maybe to finish something he couldn't. Maybe to forgive him with my hands. Piece by piece, I sanded, painted, nailed. When I was done, I mounted it outside the kitchen window. The next morning, a robin was already nesting inside. I smiled. Not because it felt like magic, but because it felt like peace. And peace, I was learning, doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it builds its home quietly, in something left behind. Sometimes it lives where pain once bloomed. Sometimes it's shaped like a birdhouse your father never finished. But you did. I didn't hear the house speak again for a while. The mirror closed and stayed shut. The journal stayed on the kitchen table. The birdhouse, quiet but occupied, stood like a little monument to something both finished and still beginning. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I started recording myself. I don't know why. Maybe to match what he left. Maybe to speak back through the silence. It started with short entries. Voice memos on my phone. July 28th. It's been a year since I started reading the letters. I can't tell if I'm healing or just learning how to sit with the ache. But I didn't drink tonight. And I smiled when I passed the mirror. August 3rd. Claire asked if I ever wanted kids. I told her I didn't know. What I meant was, I don't know how to be the kind of father I needed. But maybe needing him as bad as I did means I already know more than I think. The recordings became a ritual. My voice, out loud, finally standing on the same stage his had lingered on in cassette tapes and cards. One night I replayed one. And I didn't recognize the voice. Not at first. It sounded stronger. Not louder. Just grounded. Like someone who had spent a long time underground and had finally started climbing up. That same night, Claire came over with a suitcase. Not for moving in. Not yet. But for staying longer. For seeing what it felt like to belong. She noticed the old tapes on the bookshelf. Play one? She asked. So I did. I picked one at random. Slid it into the player. Press play. December 24th. Christmas Eve. I saw him holding a donation bag outside the shelter. Giving instead of taking. That's how I know he's more than me. That's how I know he'll survive himself. Claire didn't speak. Just placed a hand on my knee and left it there. Later, while I made tea, she called from the living room. Eli. There's another envelope here. I came running. There it was. Sitting on the mantel. Cream-colored. No dust. As if it had just been set down. You're ready now. This is the last one. I opened it slowly. The card inside was blank except for one line, centered in his now familiar script. Tell your story? That was it. No birthday. No apology. Just a challenge. A passing of the baton. The next day, I pulled out my laptop. Started typing. Not a letter. Not a memoir. Just the story as it had happened. Every dream. Every card. Every aching silence and quiet miracle. It poured out of me like I had been holding it in for lifetimes. At night, I read what I wrote aloud. To Claire. To the house. To whatever part of him was still listening. The next morning, the journal was gone. In its place, a notebook I hadn't seen before. Black cover. Empty pages. My name was embossed on the front. A gift. Not a clue. Not a breadcrumb. Just space. To fill with my voice. I started writing again. Not as a son searching for his father. But as a man who had found something unexpected in the ruins, a version of love stitched together by paper, ink, and time. I taught myself to cook like he used to. Simple things. Eggs. Toast. Bacon with too much pepper. The way he did in a photo I found once of him as a young man, grinning with a skillet in his hand. And I started building things. Birdhouses, sure. But also shelves. A table. A life. And sometimes, when the wind hit the windows just right, I thought I heard his voice again. Good. Keep going. And I did. Because his voice wasn't the one I needed anymore. Mine was. The notebook with my name on it became a sort of anchor. Some days I wrote for hours. Some days just a sentence. But every word came easier than the last. And for the first time, I didn't wonder if he was watching. I didn't need the dream versions of him anymore. The whispers. The flickering lights. What he gave me wasn't a haunting. It was permission. Claire found me on the porch one morning, coffee cooling beside me, notebook in hand, pages fluttering in the breeze. You ever gonna let me read it? She asked. Someday, I said. It's not done. Will it ever be? I shrugged. Maybe it's not supposed to be. She kissed the top of my head and didn't press further. That's one of the things I loved most about her. She didn't try to fix the parts of me still learning how to breathe. A week later, I found his will. Not the legal one, I'd already dealt with that. This was handwritten, folded inside a manila envelope labeled, "For my son, when he is ready." I opened it like I might break something. Inside, a short letter, and beneath that, a list. Eli. I didn't have much. No empire. No secrets worth money. Just stories. Regrets. A few old tools that still know how to make things. You don't need to forgive me to accept these. But I hope you will. Here's what's yours. The Mustang. The journal. The tapes. The attic key. My name, if you still want it. I reread that last line over and over. My name, if you still want it. It hit me harder than all the apologies that came before. Because names carry weight. And his had always been one I wanted to escape. But now, I didn't want to run from it. I wanted to rebuild it. So I changed mine. Eli Jameson. My father's first name. My mother's maiden name. Something new made from something old. I sent the paperwork in without ceremony. No announcement. Just action. A few days later, I visited my mother. We hadn't talked much about him. Over the years, she avoided it the way people avoid standing too close to a fire they never quite put out. But that day, I handed her the photo, the one of me on his shoulders. I think I'm starting to remember this, I said. She held it like it was glass. Eyes wet, but not falling. He wasn't all bad, she whispered. I know. She looked at me then, really looked. Saw the calm in me. The steadiness. You turned out better than I ever hoped. No, I said, smiling gently. I'm still turning. That night I lit a fire in the backyard. Not to destroy, but to mark the passage. I burned one thing only, the first card. The one that said, "Only open when you're ready to forgive me." I was ready. I watched the flames curl the edges, smoke twisting into the night sky like a blessing. And I whispered, "You were never a stranger. You were just lost." Then I went inside and kept writing. Because some stories don't end. They evolve. And I wasn't done becoming the son of a man who tried. Not yet. Maybe not ever. A year passed. I kept the house. Not because it was beautiful, or because I couldn't let go, but because it had become a conversation I was still having. A living memory. A place where pain and healing learned how to share a roof. Claire moved in on a rainy Tuesday. No ceremony. No boxes marked fragile. Just a few suitcases, her coffee mugs, and the way she hummed while organizing the bookshelf. Some days were quiet. Some were hard. But none were hollow. I spent that winter finishing the notebook. Not because I ran out of things to say, but because it began to feel like a completed sentence. Not a period. Not closure. Just enough. When I finished, I wrote one final thing. To the man who tried. You didn't get everything right. But you gave me enough to begin. And from that beginning, I made something whole. I tore out the page, folded it carefully, sealed it in a blank envelope. Then I drove. Hours into the hills, past the places I used to dream of escaping, to a spot that overlooked the valley. The kind of place you only find when you're not looking. There, I buried the letter beneath a young oak tree. No headstone. No marker. Just a final act of return. When I got back, I found Claire waiting in the doorway, smiling like she had read my silence. Ready to tell the world? She asked. I nodded. Yeah. But I think I want to start small. So I did. At the local community center, I started reading. Stories about fathers and sons. About regret and forgiveness. People listened. Some cried. One man waited until everyone else had left and hugged me without saying a word. After, I made copies of the notebook. Gave them to kids who never knew their dads. To men who were trying to become better fathers than the ones they had. To strangers in coffee shops who looked like they needed to hear that someone had made it out alive, carrying something beautiful in their hands. And one day, I returned to the mailbox at the old house. I placed a single card inside. On the front, for someone who's still trying. Inside, you're not alone. I wasn't either. Keep going. There's still time. I walked away without looking back. And maybe, just maybe, someone found it. Someone like me. Because what I've learned, the one thing I would write again and again if I had all the space and ink in the world, is this. The story never really ends. It echoes. It reaches. It waits for us. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to open the box, it answers back. Not just with sorrow, but with love. Always with love.